Here is the front of a Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, and here is the rear half of a Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, and today we've got to connect both of them together.
You can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
Imagine paying $6 million for a hypercar, only to discover the company that built it can quietly decide that car should never come back. That is the corner Mat Armstrong walked into. Not a courtroom, not a public feud. Something colder than that. A wrecked Bugatti. A salvage title.
You might have seen on the last main channel video that we started rebuilding the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport.
A digital system most owners never think about. And one question sitting underneath all of it. When you buy a machine like this, do you actually own it? Or are you just being allowed to use it until the manufacturer says otherwise? Because this story is not just about a crash. It is about power, about control, about what happens when a brand decides a car is finished, even if someone else is willing to save it.
With ideas, it's easy to have the idea to make a car, but the process to get there, putting electric powertrain in totally was the wrong way.
And once you see how this works, it stops feeling like a hypercar story. It starts feeling like a preview.
On that chassis number of vehicle, they will not supply any components.
The crash and the question. It began with what should have been just another ugly accident. October 2025, Miami. Bright lights, exotic traffic, the kind of environment where a Bugatti Chiron Per Sport almost looks normal for a moment. Almost. Then it was wrecked. Not lightly damaged, not cosmetically bruised, wrecked badly enough that people who know these cars understood immediately what that probably meant. This was not just any Bugatti. It was a Chiron Per Sport, one of only 60 ever built, a car valued around $6 million. A machine engineered at a level where every panel, every sensor, every structural component exists in a world far beyond ordinary repair bills. On something like this, damage is never just damage, it's a chain reaction. The crash itself was not some mythic fireball at impossible speed. It was the kind of incident that, in another car, would still be painful but survivable. On a Chiron, the math changes instantly. Carbon fiber, complex electronics, proprietary systems, hidden calibration, specialized parts, specialized procedures, specialized access. The insurance verdict came fast. Total loss. And once that label lands on a car like this, it lands hard. Insurers are not making emotional decisions. They are running numbers. If the cost to restore a hypercar to factory-approved condition starts climbing into absurd territory, the file gets closed. The car is written off. End of story.
Any other car you'll be able to buy your own parts for. You can't finance like a crash damaged car.
At least that is how it was supposed to end. Because while the paperwork said dead car, Mat Armstrong saw something else. A project, a challenge. Cars everyone else gives up on are exactly the ones he wants to touch. Bent, flooded, smashed, broken beyond common sense. That is where his entire reputation comes from. Taking something declared finished and dragging it back into existence. So when he looked at the wrecked Per Sport, his instinct was not to back away. It was to ask the most dangerous question possible. Can this be rebuilt? On the surface, the answer looked like the same answer his channel keeps giving over and over again. Yes, with enough skill. Yes, with enough patience. Yes, with enough fabrication and stubbornness. But this was not an ordinary rebuild with a harder badge on the nose. This was a different universe, because what Mat thought he had bought was a damaged car. What he had actually stepped into was a system. And the moment that system decided the car was done, the real story began. The digital kill switch. Bugatti did not need a dramatic public confrontation. No loud legal threat showed up on day one. No giant statement had to be made. Something quieter happened. the car's identity was effectively shut off. That is where this stops being just mechanical and becomes something much more modern. With a car like a Chiron, ownership is not only about metal, carbon fiber, engine blocks, and wiring. It is also about recognition, access, authentication, the manufacturer's internal world. In that world, the car has a digital life, a history, a status, a place inside an ecosystem controlled from above. And when a car is removed from that ecosystem, everything changes. No official parts pipeline, no normal software path, no routine diagnostics, no easy programming, no simple return to factory legitimacy. Physically, the car is still there. Digitally, it becomes a ghost, because most people think ownership is settled the moment money changes hands. But stories like this expose something else. The vehicle may sit in your building, your garage, your workshop, under your name, purchased with your money, and still be partly controlled by someone else. So the question is no longer just, can it be repaired? It becomes, are you allowed to repair it in a way that still counts? For Matt, that changed the nature of the fight completely. He was no longer just dealing with crash damage. He was dealing with a car that had been quietly cut off from the world it was designed to depend on. And yet, instead of walking away, he did the opposite. He pushed deeper. The rebuild. Because once official access is gone, only one route remains. You make your own. That sounds bold in a sentence. In reality, it is borderline insane. We are talking about one of the most tightly engineered hypercars on Earth. A Bugatti is not designed around the assumption that independent rebuilders will fabricate their way back into the system. It is built around precision, exclusivity, and control. Matt started trying to source what he needed, and doors started closing. Parts became difficult. Suppliers reportedly became hesitant. Routes that might have worked suddenly stopped looking stable. Quiet resistance started to appear around the edges, the kind that rarely comes with a press release but still sends the message clearly enough. You are not supposed to be doing this. That is when the rebuild stopped being about parts acquisition and turned into something much more radical. Fabrication, improvisation, reverse engineering. At the center of that effort sat one of the most intimidating challenges in the entire car. The horseshoe frame, not a decorative piece, not an easy bracket, a critical structural element. The kind of component manufacturers do not want duplicated outside their own walls, not casually, not ever. No factory blueprint, no easy support, no safe, pre-approved path, just the damaged reality sitting in front of him, and the decision to find a way anyway. So the grinder came out. Then the welder, then the measuring, the remeasuring, the trial and error, the failures, the adjustments, the long hours where nothing dramatic happens except the slow refusal to surrender. And that is what made this project bigger than a rebuild, because it exposed a hidden line in modern car culture. Manufacturers do not just protect logos and marketing image. At this level, they protect process, data, structure, access, engineering, legitimacy, the right to decide what is real and what is not. Maybe the word impossible had never really meant impossible. Maybe it meant unauthorized. That distinction matters. Because if something can be rebuilt outside the official system, then the official system loses part of its power. And if one person can prove that with enough determination a supposedly dead hypercar can be revived, then the mythology around what manufacturers alone can do starts to crack. That is dangerous to a brand built on total control. And once you see that, the Bugatti story stops looking isolated. It starts looking like an extreme example of a larger blueprint. Because this is not only about safety. Safety is part of the language, of course. Liability is part of it too. But money is sitting underneath all of it, shaping the decisions. Think about what happens to rarity if too many dead hypercars come back. Think about what happens to resale values if salvage cars can be skillfully restored outside official channels. Think about what happens to the illusion of untouchability if the public watches somebody in a workshop rebuild what the factory world has already written off. A destroyed car preserves the mythology. A rebuilt car says the gates are not absolute. It says permission is not the same thing as possibility. And that is exactly why this story hits a nerve far beyond YouTube. The trap, the verdict, and the warning. If a manufacturer can cut off access, restrict support, control legitimacy, and reshape the economic future of the thing you bought, how complete is your ownership really? That question gets even darker when money enters the picture. In the hypercar world, a clean title is not just paperwork. It is oxygen. Once a car gets marked, everything changes. Not gradually, violently. A machine once valued in the millions can collapse into an entirely different financial category the moment that invisible stain appears. Same engine, same body, same basic physical presence. But the market stops seeing the car as what it was and starts seeing it as something compromised. Because the real damage is not just the crash damage. It is the power to decide whether a repaired car gets to count as legitimate again. If you go through official channels, the cost can be astronomical. If you go outside them, you may bring the car back mechanically while losing the very thing the market values most: recognition. Fix it their way, and the cost becomes almost absurd. Fix it your way, and the car may never fully return in the eyes of the system. Either way, the loss remains. The car came back. Against the odds, against the restrictions, against the silence around it, piece by piece, the impossible project started becoming real. The engine lived, the body returned. The broken machine that the official world had already pronounced dead began to breathe again. And yet, that still was not the end of the sentence. Because even if the car runs, even if it moves, even if it is visually and mechanically resurrected, without factory acceptance, without that invisible handshake from the manufacturer's ecosystem, the rebuild exists in a strange, in-between state. Not junk, not fully restored in the institutional sense. A functioning ghost. Mat proved the car could be brought back, but the system proved that control does not always need to shout. Sometimes a quiet exclusion does all the work. A blacklist, a denial of access, a refusal to restore legitimacy. And suddenly, the whole project stops being about whether the car can live. It becomes about whether life is allowed to matter without approval. So who won? Did Mat win because he refused to let the car die? Or did Bugatti win because they can still make sure it never fully re-enters their world? Bugatti gave the car a death sentence. Mat Armstrong gave it another heartbeat. And somewhere between those two facts, the rules changed. If you had the money, would you still buy a car like this, knowing the manufacturer could shut the door on it forever after one disaster? Would you trust the official system even if it prices you out of saving the machine? Or would you take the risk, rebuild it anyway, and accept that the badge might never let it back in? Because this may not just be the story of one wrecked Bugatti. It may be the first clear glimpse of a blacklist era. And once that era begins, the most expensive part of the car may not be the engine, the carbon fiber, or the badge. It may be permission.